my dear students, welcome to the session, or I must say welcome to Unified Council Olympiads. So as you all know that here in this video we are going to discuss about the past papers of NSTSC exam, and I'm your expert for today. And let me tell you that this session is going to be very important and we have to make it very, very interactive. So I would suggest that you can be ready with your notebook and pen, and let's solve the paper together. So come on, let's not waste time and let's start solving. So first question says, a block of mass m is at rest on a frictionless horizontal table placed in a lab on the surface of the earth. So it says a block of mass m, let's say this is block of mass m, okay, it is placed at rest on a frictionless horizontal surface. Let's say this is a horizontal table placed in the lab, and this table is placed on earth, okay. So it is horizontal table placed in a lab on the surface of earth. An identical block is at rest, same block of same everything is placed on a frictionless, again both the surfaces are frictionless, horizontal table, and it is placed on the surface of moon. Okay, so let F be the net force necessary to give the earthbound block an acceleration A. So let's say if we provide force F, it gives the block an acceleration A on the surface of earth. We know that g of moon is 1/6 of earth. Okay, so the force necessary to give the moon-bound block the same acceleration as provided to the one which is on the surface of earth across the table is dash. So we need to tell that how much force we have to apply to this block which is placed on the surface of moon to give it an acceleration same which is given to this block which is placed on the surface of earth. Now let me tell you that we know that g means acceleration due to gravity. What is g? G represents acceleration due to gravity. And we know that acceleration due to gravity is same on the surface of a particular planet. Like if you will take the value on the earth, it comes out to be 9.8 meter per second square. So whatever things are freely falling or falling towards the earth, the acceleration produced in them due to gravity is 9.8 meter per second, and it is irrespective of the mass of the body. Okay, same way, if we talk about moon, it is seen that g of moon, that is small g of moon, is equal to 1/6 of ge. Means the value of g on moon is approximately 1.63 meter per second square. If you will solve like this, you will find it that it is equal to 1.63 meter per second square. Now both the surfaces are frictionless. And also both the surfaces are horizontal. And we know acceleration due to gravity acts vertically. So that is the reason the force required in both the case is going to remain same to provide the same acceleration. Therefore the answer won't be F by 2, won't be F by 6, won't be F by 3. It will be option D. The reason being, both the surfaces are frictionless and the movement is horizontal. So whatever force you will apply, a body is going to move horizontal. So in that case, vertical force doesn't play any role. Now the question says that a constant force acts on an object of mass 5 kg. So that means there is some value of force which is acting on an object whose mass is 5 kg, and it is acting for duration 2 seconds. It increases the object's velocity from 3 to 7 meter per second. So initial velocity is 3 meter per second and it is increased to 7 meter per second, that is final velocity. Now we need to find the magnitude of applied force. First you need to find this constant force for this case. So let's find it first. We know that F is equal to m into A. So m we have is 5 kg, and acceleration we don't have. So basically we can make use of first equation of motion. V is equal to u plus at, that is 7 is equal to 3 plus A we need to find, and time is 2 seconds. So it comes out to be 7 minus 3 is equal to 2A, or we can write that A comes out to be 2 meter per second square. So putting value of 2 here, you will get force as 10 Newton. So force is 10 Newton. Now let's read ahead. If the force is applied for the duration 5 seconds now, same force. So that means same force is applied, but it is applied for time, that is 5 seconds. We need to find the final velocity. Obviously initial velocity will remain same, and we need to find final velocity here. Now how can we find that? We can use V is equal to u plus at. So what is V? We need to find u is 3, time we have is 5, and A can be found by using F is equal to m into A. So it is 10, mass is same, and A comes out to be 2 meter per second square. So putting value of A here, it will be this, and it will come out to be 3 plus 10, that comes out to be 13 meter per second. So option that has these two answers, that is force as 10 Newton and final velocity as 13 meter per second, is the right answer. So which one is right? Option B is correct. Next question. A man has to exert a large force to keep the load stationary above his head. So he's a man and he's holding a load, and he's holding it above his hand, and he has to apply large force. So which statement is correct? Now let me tell you, when he's holding something, here the question is related to work done or not. So basically what is work? Work is ability. What is work? Work is done when force produces motion. When force produces motion. That means work is done when force acts on a body and it produces, somehow a displacement, or you can say it covers certain distance. So work is done when force produces motion. So its expression becomes W is equal to F into S. Now work done can be said as positive, can be said as negative, or can be equal to 0. So positive work is done when body moves in the same direction in which the force is applied. And negative work is done when force is applied in one direction and body is moving in opposite to it. And 0 work is done is when, because expression can be written as F is cos theta also. So it can be, work done is 0 when the angle that it makes, the angle in which the body moves, make with the direction of the force applied is 90 degree. So here in this case cos 90 is 0. So work done is said to be 0. Okay. So anything that we are holding up and which is not moving, in that case we say that work done is 0 because there is no displacement. So first option says a man has done work on the load because he has used lot of energy. No. Work is done only and only when a force acts and also a body moves. And here you can see there is no motion. A man has done work on the load because force is large. No. A man has not done work on the load because the resultant force is 0. Here resultant force isn't 0. A man has not done work, correct, on the load because load has not moved, correct. Because force acts but the distance moved is 0 in this case. So therefore work done is 0. So that is the reason which option is correct, students. Option D is correct. Next question. A person walks a distance of 30 meter towards east. So let's say a person walks a distance of 30 meter and towards east with the speed 2 meter per second. So moving with speed 2 meter per second. Okay. And 40 meter towards north, another distance with a speed 3 by 2 meter per second. We need to find its average speed. We need to find average velocity for this journey. Now let me tell you, average speed is total distance traveled by the body in any direction divided by total time taken. So in order to find average speed, we need total distance. So it is traveling 30 meter towards east and 40 towards north. So total becomes 30 plus 40, that is 70 meters. Now we need total time also. So we'll find the time for this first case. So it is equal to speed is equal to distance by time, or we can write time is equal to distance by speed. So it comes out to be 30 by 2, that is 15 seconds. Okay, and for this again speed is equal to distance by time, or we can write time is equal to distance by speed. Distance is 40 and this is 3 by 2. So comes out to be 80 by 3 seconds. So this is total time. So if we wish to find average speed, we can use this expression, and if you will solve for it, you will get answer as 42 by 25. 42 by 25 meter per second. This is the average speed. Now we need to find average velocity. What is average velocity? Instead of distance, what we write? Total displacement divided by total time. So total time will remain same, that is 15 plus 80 by 3, and displacement we'll find out, like it is 30 in 1 and 40 in 1. So total displacement can be found 30 square plus 40 square, and it comes out to be 70 meters. I hope you know how to find total displacement when the body is traveling towards east and towards in the direction of north. So basically comes out to be 70. So this is total displacement over total time. So if you will solve for it, you will get the answer as 6 by 5. See, you have to do the calculation yourself, okay? So these are the two answers. So basically option D is correct. I hope you understood how to find average speed and average velocity, and if you require total distance and total time, so I think you know how to find that. Option D is the correct answer. Next question. A person standing on a horizontal floor feels two forces. So a person is standing on a horizontal force, let's say this is person standing, and the downward pull of the gravity and the upward supporting force from the floor. So it experiences two force, one towards the gravity and upward supporting force from the floor. So these two forces in this case is, see, person is standing, that means person is not moving, it is at rest. So A option says have equal magnitude and form an action-reaction pair. Have equal magnitude but do not form an action-reaction pair. Have unequal magnitude and form an action-reaction pair. Have unequal magnitude and do not form an action-reaction pair. We know that if two forces are acting in equal magnitude, right, they don't make the body move. They don't make the body move. Now here a man is stationary, so obviously forces acting are of equal magnitude. Forces are acting on it are of equal magnitude. Now action reaction pair. For example, if I'm pushing wall, wall is also exerting equal and opposite force. Now here it doesn't form action reaction pair, because action reaction pair comes into notice when you have two different objects. That is the reason option B is correct. That is, forces are of equal magnitude but they do not form action reaction pair, because in that case the bodies have to be different, and here it is acting on the same body. Next, a block of mass 3 kg slides down a frictionless inclined plane. So here we have a frictionless inclined plane and we have a block and its mass is 3 kg. And the length of the plane is 6 meter and height of the plane is 4 meter. If the block is released from the rest, that is initial velocity is 0, from the top of the plane, let's say this is top, okay. So what is the speed at the bottom? So when the body is at rest, we know the energy that it possessed is potential energy. The energy that it possesses is potential energy. And whenever a body is in motion, the energy possessed by it is kinetic energy. We find potential energy as mgh, that is mass of the body, as acceleration due to gravity, and height to which it is placed. Kinetic energy equal to half mv square, that is mass into square of the velocity it possesses. Now in this case we have seen that like here in this case, when a block is at top, it possesses potential energy, but when it starts moving, the same energy gets converted to kinetic energy. So we can say that for this, mgh is equal to half mv square. So we can cancel out m because mass of the body block is same for both. We need to find the speed. So basically we can write as v is equal to root of 2gh. Root of 2gh. So if you put the value here, you will find that it comes out to be 9 meter per second. That is 2, and then you have 9.8, and we also have the height. So answer comes out to be option B. Answer comes out to be option B. Next question. An object that is moving with constant speed travels once around a circular path. Then its A, displacement is 0, average speed is 0, acceleration is 0, or both A and B. Now let me tell you, we know that what is motion. A body, when a body covers certain distance with respect to any stationary object, or in respect to a reference point, right, or with respect to another object. So then a body is said to be in motion. Now motion, there are of different types, like you have linear motion when a body is moving in a straight line. You have a circular motion when a body is moving in a circular path. Okay, so when a body is moving in a circular path, let's say a body starts from here and ends up here. So circular path is something where initial and final points, they coincide. Initial and final points, they coincide. Same way if I talk about displacement. So displacement is the shortest path covered by the body. Displacement is shortest path covered by any body. And displacement is 0 when initial and final point, when initial position and final position is same, then displacement becomes 0. Now here when a body is moving in a circular path, it is starting from here and ending at the same. So therefore for this case, displacement is 0. Displacement is 0. Now here in this case you have options. Displacement is 0. Yes, it is true. Average speed is 0. No, average speed can't be 0 because average speed is total distance by total time. It is traveling distance. Okay. And obviously it is taking some time also. Acceleration is 0. No, when a body is moving in a circular path, it is constantly changing its direction. And when the direction is changed, so that means, it possesses the non-uniform velocity. And when you have non-uniform velocity, we say that body is said to be accelerated. So therefore, the correct answer for this question is, students, just option A, that is displacement is 0 when a body is moving in a circular path. Next question. 4 solids made up of aluminium, steel, cork and wood are of same shape and same volume. Which of them would have highest inertia? Now what is inertia basically? Inertia is inherent property of any substance which resist the change in it, and inertia depends upon the mass of the body. More is the mass of the body, more inertia it will have. That means more resistance against changing, creating a change in it. For example, if you have two stones rolling down, say one is the bigger stone and one is the smaller stone, so force required to stop that would be more in case of the bigger one. The reason being, it is big in size, its inertia is more, that is its resistance is more. Therefore, to change its state, force applied will be definitely more. So here in this case, we have options cork, aluminium, steel and wood. And out of 4, which one is, having more mass or more density? Obviously, it is steel. That is why inertia possessed would be more for steel. So which answer is correct, students? Option C. Next question. A lady runs up a flight of stairs Okay. She accelerates in the first 4 steps and then deaccelerates in 3 steps. And eventually she is at rest. So that means when the lady is climbing stairs, then what do we see? That accelerates in first 4 steps. Okay, that means acceleration is increasing in this, and deaccelerates in the last 3 steps, 1, 2 and 3, and then finally she reaches the top. Okay, so find the status of both kinetic and potential energies from the second to the third, from this to this. See, here in this case, if you talk about potential and kinetic energy, we know that potential energy is the energy possessed by the body when it is at rest, and kinetic energy is the energy which is possessed by the body when it is in motion. So here we find potential energy by using mgh relation and kinetic energy by using half mv square. Now when this lady is in between second to third, both of the energies they increase, both of the energy increases. So therefore which answer is correct, students? Option A. The reason being, it is she's accelerating for first 4 steps and but deaccelerating in the last 3 steps. Next question. On the frozen lake, the ice will break if the pressure on it is greater than 1 Newton per centimeter square. So here it is written that frozen lake can withstand the pressure of 1 Newton per centimeter square. And 4 boys PQRS, they stood on the ice. You have 4 boys PQRS and they are exerting, like their weight is this and the area of the feet is this. So which one will fall through it? So we know that pressure is can be calculated by force per unit area. Pressure is basically force per unit area. So using this relation we can find it out, and force can be replaced by weight if weight is given, because weight is also a force with which the earth attracts the objects. So both of them is somehow related. So we can find the pressure for all the cases. So pressure is equal to force upon area, that is 270. For Q it will be, again I'll write here, for P it is 200 by 270. For Q it is 300 by 250. For R it is 400 by 500. And for S it is 500 by 560. I'll tell you the answer that you will get in all the cases. So in first you will get 0.74 Newton per centimeter square. For second case it will be 1.2 Newton per centimeter square. Third would be 0.8 Newton per centimeter square. And for fourth, like if you will find it for fourth, it will be somehow you will calculate, you will get the answer. I don't have the calculation ready with me. So it is a sum above 50 by 56 Newton. Now the one which will fall through, obviously which exert more force than that. So 1.2 is more than 1 because it can withstand the pressure of only 1. So therefore the correct answer is option B, that is Q. It means boy Q will fall through because force applied by it is, like the pressure exerted by it is more than the pressure it can withstand. Now the question says, two metallic oxides contain 27.6% and 30.0% oxygen respectively. So here the question is related to percentage. So here it is given that we have got two metallic oxides. Okay, so let's say if this is one metallic oxide, this is, let's say, second metallic oxide. So it is given that one of them contains 27.6% of oxygen. Let's say in the first metallic oxide, the percentage of oxygen is 27.6. It is 27.6%. Okay. And in the second, the percentage of oxygen is 30.0%. So if the formula of the first oxide is M3O4, it is given. So we need to find the formula for the second metal oxide. Now here in this question, the perfect way to find it is that first we need to find the percentage of metal here. So if I wish to find percentage of metal, we can write it this, that I'll write here. In case of first oxide, we have M3O4, right? So in this it is present, like we can find the metal present is 100 minus obviously 27.6, which comes out to be 72.4 parts. Comes out to be 72.4 parts. Same way we can find in the second, for the second oxide. So in second oxide, metal present would be 100 minus the percentage of oxygen, which comes out to be 70 parts. Come out to be 70 parts. Okay. Now to find the formula, how we can find it? Because in the first oxide we have seen that 3 atoms of metal combines with 4 atoms of oxygen. 3 atoms of M combines with 4 atoms of O. So we can write here that is 3 atoms of M, that is 72.4 parts, combined with 4 atoms of O, which is 27.6 parts. Now if we wish to find it for 70 parts, we can find that 70 parts is 70 parts of M, because here you have found that metal is 70 parts. So 70 parts of M is equal to 3 by 72.4 into 70 atoms of metal M in the second oxide. So if you will solve it, we will find that it comes out to be 2.9 atoms of M. Same we can find it for oxygen. So how many parts? 30 parts. So we can find same way 30 parts of O would be equal to how many atoms are present here? 4. 4 by 27.6 into 30 atoms of O for the second. So it comes out to be 4.3 atoms. So if you take the ratio, it comes out to be 2.9 ratio 4.35, and if you round it off, it comes out to be 2:3. So that means the formula for the second oxide would be M2O3. So here in this question, the option that is correct is not first, not second, not third, it is fourth. So which answer is correct, students? Option D. So I hope you understood. First you need to find the percentage of metal by using the data given for the oxygen, and then for M3O4 it is already given. Using that you can find it for the given parts of M and given parts of O for the second oxide. Next question. Two substances P and Q were made to react to form a third substance P2Q. You can see here that you have two substances P and Q. They are reacting and you get P2Q. What do you get? You get P2Q. Now we need to read the statements given below. Now let me tell you about it. Here when you see that we have got P plus Q. So in this basically what is reacting? Two elements are reacting and they are forming a compound. Now what exactly a compound is? Compound is formed when the elements, they chemically react with each other. And when they react, they combine in fixed ratio of volume and mass. And also the ratio is always a whole number. It is always a whole number. And whenever a compound is formed, it will not show the properties of its elements. So you can say that properties of compounds are entirely different or independent of the nature of the elements that combine to form a compound. So basically these elements, they do not hold their identity in this compound. Okay, and because it involves chemical reaction, it's a chemical change. So obviously when compound is formed, energy changes also take place. Now these are the few characteristics of the compound. Now here few statements are given. statement 1 is the product P2Q shows the properties of substances P and Q. No, it doesn't, because P2Q is a compound, and compound never show the properties of the elements from which it is formed. It has entirely different properties. Or you can say the properties are independent of the properties of the combining elements. So first statement is wrong. The product will always have a fixed composition. It's true. Because if we wish to form P2Q, it will be formed only when the ratio of volume of P2Q is 2:1. So the ratio, or you can say that compound, has got fixed composition. The product so formed cannot be classified as a compound. It is false. It is classified as a compound because compound is formed when atoms of two or more elements combine in a fixed whole number ratio, and the ratio is also fixed. Fourth, the product so formed is an element. No. Element is a substance which is formed of atoms, and it cannot be further broken down. But here it is formed by the combination of elements, so definitely it's a compound, not element. So we need to tell that which of the statement concerning the above reactions are incorrect. So the option which states 1, 3 and 4 will be the right answer. That means option C. Option C is the right answer. Next question. An ionic compound of element M and chlorine has formula MCl3. Molecular mass of MCl3 is 118.5. What is the molecular mass of the oxide of the element M? So first of all, I hope you have understood the statement. It is saying that we have got an ionic compound. An ionic compound which is formed by interchanging the valencies of a cation and an anion. And it has got formula MCl3. Now, if the formula is MCl3, definitely metal valency would be M3 positive, and in this chloride is used, that is Cl negative. Now, if we wish to make its formula for oxygen, so definitely it will use the same valency, and oxygen we know exists as oxide ion O2 negative, and the formula would be M2O3. Because we have to make the same formula using its valency as shown in MCl3. Now, we need to find the molecular mass of the oxide. Now, how can we find the molecular mass? Definitely, if we have molecular mass of M, then we can find it for complete molecule, because atomic mass of oxygen is 16. So, if we have mass for M, we can definitely find it for M2O3. Now, we don't have M, so we can find the mass of M using this compound, because M used in both the case is same. So, here it is given that molecular mass of MCl3 is 118.5. And we know that molecular mass MCl3, the way of calculating is mass of one atom of M plus 3 into mass of one atom of chlorine. This is how we find. So here it is given, already given, and this we need to find. And for chlorine, we know it is, what do we use? We use 35.5. So if you will solve for it, X will come out to be 12. X will come out to be 12. Now we can use this 12, like mass of M as 12 in this case. So that means molecular mass would be 2 into 12 plus 3 into 16, comes out to be 24, and 48, which is 72. So that means option C is correct. Which option is correct, student? Option C. So this way you need to find first the mass from one compound, and then, because same metal is used for making second, so you can put its mass in the second and find the molecular mass. Next question. Which one of the following statements is true? A statement says a concentrated solution has a large amount of solute dissolved in a large amount of solvent. A dilute solution has a small amount of solute dissolved in a small amount of solvent. A dilute solution has a small amount of solute dissolved in a large amount of solvent. A concentrated solution has a small amount of solute dissolved in a large amount of solvent. Because this question is based on solution, so let's understand solution first. Solution is formed, it is, first you should know that it's a mixture only, and it is formed when we mix two components, two or more components in any ratio. mixing two or more components in any ratio. So basically, common type of solution is formed when we make use of two components, and they are called as binary solution. And the component of binary solution is definitely solute and solvent. It is solute and solvent. What is solute? One which is present in less amount, and solvent is the one which is present in more amount. Also, solute gets dissolved in solvent. It gets dissolved, and solvent has a power to dissolve solute. Okay, so this is how you define solute and solvent. For example, if I take water and if I add salt into it, so water is going to act as a solvent and salt is going to act as a solute, because solute is present in small amount and also it gets dissolved, and solvent present in large amount and it has the ability to dissolve salt in it. That is why water acting as a solvent and salt acting as a solute in this case. Now we have solution based upon the concentration of solute and solvent. That means how much solute is present in a solution. Based on that, we can classify solutions into two categories as concentrated solution and dilute solution. Concentrated solution is that which has more solute in it in comparison to solvent, and dilute is the one where solute present in less and solvent is more, where solvent is comparatively more. We can make any solution concentrated or dilute depending upon the amount of solute that we are adding. Now I think you will be able to find the statement which is true. Concentrated solution, we know that concentrated is the one which has more amount of solute dissolved in a large amount of solvent. False, because it has to be small amount of solvent. A dilute solution is that which has small amount of solute, right, dissolved in a small amount of solvent. False, because here in this case the solvent amount is more. A dilute solution has a small amount of solute, fine, and large amount of solvent. Yes, correct. Concentrated has got small amount of solute. False, because it has more amount of solute. So which option is correct, student, here? Option C is correct, because it is properly defined. Dilute solution, small amount of solute but more amount of solvent. Next question is, a student poured 100 ml of water into a beaker and boiled it till all the water gets evaporated. So a beaker which contains 100 ml of water, 100 ml of water, and boiled it till all the water gets evaporated. So he is boiling it and water is getting evaporated. These are vapors, let's say. So which of the following graph correctly shows the change in temperature of the water? I hope you all know what is temperature. Basically, temperature is defined as degree of hotness or coldness of a body. Degree of hotness or a coldness of a body. And we can measure temperature by using thermometer. Okay, in different scales like degrees Celsius, in Fahrenheit or in Kelvin. Now talking about water, we know that water exists in three states: ice, water, and you have vapor or steam. It is solid form, it is liquid form, and it is gaseous form of water. Now we know that ice exists below 0 degrees Celsius, or we can say that melting point of ice is 0 degree Celsius, and boiling point of water is 100 degree. Means above 100 it forms gaseous state. Above 100 it forms gaseous state. So that means if we divide the scale 0 degrees Celsius, let's say 100 degrees Celsius, so below this you get ice, here you get water, and above 100 you get vapors or steam. Okay, now here the graphs are plotted between temperature and time. So if we have water, obviously the temperature would be between 0 to 100. Temperature would be between 0 to 100. So when you keep on heating it, then the temperature will definitely rise. So changing temperature, when we are heating, temperature is getting increased. and that is why water will get converted into gaseous state. This what happens when you heat it. So therefore first graph is incorrect, because here you can see temperature is falling down on heating, which is not possible. In second, you can see that temperature is increasing linearly. So that's fine with time temperature is increasing, because when you heat something, temperature increase linearly. But here the temperature, like here it is shown that at 0 degrees Celsius, water was present, because we know that 0 degrees Celsius, the state is ice, not water. It starts melting at that point. So that is why it is wrong. C says that temperature remains constant, which is incorrect. When you heat something, temperature cannot remain constant. So therefore the correct answer is option D, because it shows that temperature remains constant for some time and then it starts increasing. So which option is correct, student? Option D is correct. Next question. 10 grams of CaCO3 on heating leaves behind a residue weighing 5.6 grams. So CaCO3 is being heated. What is CaCO3? Calcium carbonate, also called as limestone or marble. So when you heat it, it gets decomposed. So basically we say it shows decomposition reaction, breaking down into calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. So when 10 grams of calcium carbonate were on heating, it leaves behind a residue weighing 5.6 grams. Okay, residue left is 5.6 grams. Now we know that this is gas. So basically residue is the weight of calcium oxide only. It's a weight of calcium oxide only. So if somebody asks you how much CO2 is liberated, obviously CO2 liberated would be 10 minus this, because initially it was this, you got this, so rest mass was of gas. So it comes out to be 4.4 grams. So that means CO2 is 4.4 grams. That means now carbon dioxide released in the atmosphere at STP, we have to find the volume. Carbon dioxide released in the atmosphere at STP, how we'll find the volume of this gas? So basically we know that the mass of carbon dioxide is 12 plus 16 into 2 comes out to be 44 grams. So one molecule weighs 44 grams. So 44 grams of CO2 at STP, it occupies a volume of 22.4 liters. We know that these are the standard condition of temperature and pressure, and volume exists as 22.4. Now if we have 4.4 grams of CO2, then how much volume it will occupy? Obviously it will occupy 22.4 divided by 44 into 4.4, which comes out to be 2.24 liters. So therefore the correct answer is, students, is option A. So which answer is correct? Option A is correct. So the question says now, a student tested the solubility of 4 different substances and at different temperatures in 100 grams of water and collected the following data. Here we have a data given. That is, you can see 4 samples: potassium nitrate, sodium chloride, potassium chloride and ammonium chloride, and their solubility at different temperatures. The amount which is present at given temperature, solute basically in 100 ml of water. This is given. Now if the amount of water taken is reduced by 20%, like it has taken 100 grams, now it is reduced by 20%, then what amount of ammonium chloride would be required? Ammonium chloride would be required to prepare its saturated solution at 353 Kelvin. And it is given that when you take 100 grams, a saturated solution is prepared by taking up 66 grams of ammonium chloride. Now we need to find it that when we reduce water by 20%, then how much ammonium chloride will be required to make the solution saturated. Now if it is reduced by 20%, we can write that the amount of water available would be 100 minus 100 into 20 by 100. So it comes out to be how much water is available now? 80 grams is available. 80 grams is available. So in 100 grams, how much solute was present? 66 grams. So in 80 grams, how will you find it out? You will find by 66 divided by 100 into 80. So if you will solve for it, it will come out to be 53 grams. So basically by unitary method we have done that in the 100 grams it is 66. So in 1 gram it is 66 by 100. So in 80 grams it is 66 by 100 into 80. Solve for it and you will get your answer as 53 grams. So therefore the correct answer for this option would be option C. Next question. The largest number of N atoms are found in. We need to find number of N atoms. So which has got more number of N atoms? 50 grams of NO2, 150 ml of liquid pyridine, 25 grams of N2O or 0.5 mole of N2. Now let me tell you the easiest way. We know that we can find number of atoms by using the formula number of atoms by calculating the moles first and then multiplying it with Avogadro's number. This is how you find. And you also know that we can find mole by using the given mass divided by the molecular mass. And we also know that we can find the molecular mass by writing the mass of one atom, adding it to mass of another type of atom, and if the number of atoms are 2, 3, you multiply with coefficients, means 1, 2, 3 depending upon the number of atoms which makes that particular molecule. So basically if you try it out, then you will find that if you find for 50 grams of NO2, so basically it the formula, like the way of calculating would be mass 50, molecular mass is going to be 14 plus 16 into 2, okay, so into Avogadro's number, that is 6.022 into 10 raised to power 23. So if you will find for the same, you will find it out that first this one contains how many atoms? 6.55 into 10 raised to power 23 atoms. And in second you have got 150 ml of liquid pyridine. Then you can find it the same way, but here in order to find the mass we need to multiply volume with density. Okay, so mass we can find, volume you have 150 ml, density is given 0.983. So you can find the given mass, which will come out to be 79 grams. So once you have this mass, you can put it 79, and if you will find the molecular mass, it will come out to be 147.45 into Avogadro's number. Okay, so if you will solve for it, so for pyridine it will come out to be 11.24 into 10 raised to power again 23 atoms. Okay, for this you have already have mass, so 25 divided by 14 into 2 plus 16. Okay, so if you will find it for this, you will get your answer as 6.84 into 10 raised to power 23. So this is for the third one. Same way, you have moles already given. So you already have moles, you don't have to find moles. So multiply it directly with the Avogadro number and you will get it as fourth one, 6.023 into 10 raised to power 23. So if you compare all these 1, 2 and 3, 4 number of atoms, so you will find it out that it is maximum for option B, that is for pyridine. So this way you need to find it out. And the other easiest way is just find their number of moles, because here they haven't asked you to write the number of atoms. You don't have to find the correct number of atoms. So if you will find number of moles, then after finding number of moles you can easily have your answer, because a molecule which has more number of moles is definitely going to have more number of atoms. So that way also you can do it. That is to avoid such big calculations, you can just find number of moles, and a molecule which has more number of moles will definitely have more number of atoms. Next, identify the masses of sodium chloride and water respectively that is required to obtain 175 grams of 15% solution. So basically, what do we mean by concentration? This numerical is based on concentration. Concentration means the amount of solute which is added to a solution at given temperature. Okay, so we can find concentration using a method called as mass percentage. So how we calculate? We write mass of solute divided by total mass of solution, that is adding mass of solute and solvent and multiplying it with 100. Now here mass percentage is already given. See, it is given 15%. And total mass of the solution is also given 175. But we don't have the masses of sodium chloride in water. So let's solve for sodium chloride first. So let's say we are finding it for sodium chloride. So simply you can find it out. 15 into 175 divided by 100 will give you the mass of NaCl. And if you will solve for it, you will get the answer as 26.25 grams. Now once you have mass for NaCl, we can find it for water. So mass of total mass minus mass of sodium chloride will give you the mass of water, which will come out to be 148.75. So that means mass of water is 148.75 and mass of NaCl is 26.25 gram. So that means here the correct option is option A. Correct answer is option A. Next question. The boiling points of diethyl ether, acetone, N-butyl alcohol is given 35 degrees Celsius, 56 degrees Celsius, 118 degrees Celsius respectively. Which one of the following correctly represents their boiling points in the Kelvin scale? Now we know that temperature is basically the degree of hotness or coldness of a body. Degree of coldness or a hotness of a body, and it is measured by thermometer. Instrument which is used to measure it is thermometer, and we have different kind of thermo scales of measuring temperature: degree Celsius, Kelvin, as well as Fahrenheit. So here we are talking about degree Celsius and Kelvin. So we can convert degree Celsius into Kelvin. How? By simply adding 273. The reason being 0 degrees Celsius is equal to 273 Kelvin. Okay, so we can convert degree Celsius into Kelvin. So let's say we have 35 degrees Celsius. So 35 added to 273, you will get as 308 Kelvin. Likewise, for 56 degrees Celsius can be converted to Kelvin again by adding 273, you will get 329 Kelvin. Third, 118 again can be converted into Kelvin scale by adding 273, and it comes out to be 391 Kelvin. So the answer option basically which has 308, 329 and 391 as option would be correct. That is option C. So therefore you should always remember that scales of temperature, they have certain relation in them. Using that we can convert the scales. Next question says, the figure below shows 3 different types of leukocytes. So you have 3 different types of leukocytes. Which of the leukocytes shown produces antibodies to fight pathogen? Here you have the picture. So you have 3 types of leukocytes. I hope you all know, if we talk about blood, blood has got 3 types of cells in it: RBCs, WBCs and platelets. Now RBCs are red blood cells, and their main characteristic is that they contain red color pigment in them, which is hemoglobin, which is concerned with the transportation of gases. Now if I talk about WBCs, white blood cells, their main function is that they can protect our body from infection causing agent, or we can say that they act as soldiers of a body, because they build our immunity, or they give us strength and the power to fight with the infection causing agents. And platelets, they are involved in the process of blood clotting. They are involved in the process of blood clotting to prevent excess loss of blood. Now here this question is somehow related to WBCs. So WBCs are also called as leukocytes. Other name for WBC is leukocytes. And I told you that WBC help or you can say they provide immunity to a body. Immunity means resistance against disease. Resistance against diseases. So there are different types of leukocytes which are performing different functions. So how basically leukocyte protect us from infection causing agent? Either either it secretes some antibodies which fight against infection causing agents, or else what it does, it eats the infection causing agent. It eats up the infection causing agent. So in both ways it is protecting our body from diseases. Okay, so basically in that case it is building our immunity. So out of this XYZ, one which produce antibodies, they are white, that is lymphocyte. So out of these three, option C is correct, because Y is identified as lymphocyte, and it protect our body by producing antibodies which can fight against pathogens, that is infection causing agents. Next question: which microorganism plays an important role in the nitrogen cycle? Bacteria, algae, fungi, or all the above? Let me tell you, correct answer is option A. Correct answer is option A. It plays an important role in the nitrogen cycle. Basically, what is nitrogen cycle? See, nitrogen is present in air. Or else you can say that if we speak about any cycle, they are called as biogeochemical cycles. What do we call them as? Biogeochemical cycles. So basically these cycles are the cyclic, which indicates the cyclic flow of nutrients and other substances between abiotic and the biotic factors. It is basically a cyclic flow of nutrients or other things between biotic and abiotic components of the ecosystem. So if we talk about nitrogen cycle, bacteria plays an important role. And which bacteria? Rhizobium bacteria. Which bacteria? Rhizobium bacteria. Because this bacteria, is capable of fixing atmospheric nitrogen. It has the power to fix atmospheric nitrogen and convert into nitrogen compound, that is nitrates and nitrites. So this plays an important role. And this bacteria is present in the root nodules of leguminous plants like pea. Okay, so bacteria plays an important role, therefore undoubtedly the correct answer is option A. Next question: cholera occurs when people do not have access to proper sanitation, that is clean water supply, hygienic food and living condition. So cholera is an airborne disease, waterborne disease or foodborne disease. Now let me tell you, if we talk about cholera, so cholera is a disease which spreads when you drink impure water. Basically it's a waterborne disease. Okay, when water has some infection causing agent in it, or foodborne disease, that is eating the contaminated food. So basically what happens, like if your food gets contaminated, if I take an example of mosquito, we often say that do not keep your food without a lid. Cover your food item and then place it. So when we go out and eat vendor food, we can see that they keep all the food items without lid. So mosquitoes or flies, when they sit there and they sit on the infection causing agent also, they pass the infection causing agent to the food item. And if you consume that food item, that infection causing agent will go inside your body, multiply, causing disease. So basically cholera occurs, it is a waterborne as well as foodborne disease. That means diseases which are spread due to contaminated water and contaminated food. So here the correct answer is option B. Option B is the right answer. And I hope you all know diseases always cause discomfort. So we need to protect ourselves definitely from disease causing agents so that we can remain healthy, in the healthy state where you don't have any sort of discomfort. Next question: which of the following reproduces only in a host cell? So you have got option A, B, C and D. Now let me tell you that these all are microorganisms. All the pictures represent microorganisms. And what are microorganisms? They are the tiny organisms that we cannot see with our naked eye because they are very small. So how can we see them? We can see them by using an instrument, that is microscope. And we have got different types of microorganisms. We have got bacteria, virus, fungi, protozoan. So we have got different, varieties. Now let me tell you that out of them, virus is a microorganism which is considered to be dead, but it becomes living when it enters into a host cell, because it utilizes the host cell machinery and complete all its required activities. And virus, cause many diseases like AIDS, flu. These all are caused by virus. So option A shows an virus that it goes into inside the host cell, become living, utilize its machinery and replicate. So which option is correct? Option A. Next question says, the given diagram represents this. You have a diagram and it represents, here you can see nucleus, oval or rounded cells, oil globules. Let me tell you, it represents adipose tissue. It represents adipose tissue. So if I talk about tissues, tissues are basically group of cells which are similar in structure and also structure as well as function. Similar in structure as well as function. So basically here in tissues, we have different kind of tissues, and in that we have one category which states adipose tissue, one kind of connective tissue. So adipose tissue is actually, the fat which is present below your skin. It represents a fatty layer which is present below your skin or around your visceral organs, and it acts as a cushion. Basically it acts as a cushion and also it acts as an insulator. Now adipose tissue contains cells called as adipocytes, which has got big fat droplet inside it. So this picture represents adipose tissue, that is nucleus, rounded cells, oil globules. So this is basically adipose tissue. So which option is correct here, students? Option C. Next question. Most of the global warming is due to perturbation of which of these cycles? Nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle, water cycle, or all of the above? Now let me explain you global warming. What is global warming? Global warming means increase in the temperature of the atmosphere from its normal value. Okay, excessive increase in the temperature of the atmosphere. Now how does it occur? We all know that carbon dioxide gas is also one of the component of the air. Now this gas has a property, when sun rays come, we know that sun rays consist of different rays. You have got infrared rays also, you have got UV rays also, you have visible rays also coming from the sun. So visible rays are not harmful for us because it gives color to everything that you see around. UV rays are stopped by the ozone layer, and infrared rays cause heating effect. So when these rays come, they carbon dioxide molecule allow them to pass through, but when they strike the surface of earth, they get reflected back. Now once they get reflected back and pass back from the atmosphere, they get trapped in the carbon dioxide molecules. The reason being their wavelength increases, and once the carbon dioxide allow them to enter, but after multiple reflection it doesn't allow that wavelength of infrared rays to escape out. So as a result, these infrared rays gets trapped in carbon dioxide molecule, and because they cause heating effect, so that is why it leads to increase in the temperature of atmosphere, which we call it as global warming, and it causes ecological imbalance. So any activity or any cycle which increases the carbon dioxide content in the atmosphere will definitely lead to global warming. So out of these three, carbon cycle is the one which can be a cause of global warming, because we know that carbon occur in atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. So if the carbon dioxide is not properly regulated, then more amount of carbon dioxide will be accumulated in atmosphere, and it's a greenhouse gas causing global warming. So which option is correct here? Option B. Next question. Which of the following classes of animals have scales on their bodies? Which out of them has got scales over their bodies? Now let me tell you, options are mammals, you have pieces, you have reptiles, and also you have this thing, amphibians. Now let me tell you, out of them, the animals which have scales on their bodies, in this answer, what is going to be right? Let me tell you that. But before, we have to learn something about these classes. So basically they basically they have some few important characteristics in them. They have few important characteristics in them, and out of them, which have scales would be, what do you think, 1 2 1 2 3, or 2 3 4? What do you think would be the right answer here? Yes, you got it right. It is option B, that is 1 2 and 3. That is uh, that is B part, 1 2 and 3. They have got scales over their bodies. Now if I talk about reptiles particularly, then you know that reptiles are basically cold-blooded animals. Their body is covered with scales, and also they cannot regulate their body temperature as per the atmospheric temperature. So that is the reason, it makes reptiles different from other. And if I talk about this, in this, which organisms fall, fishes falls in this category. So basically here also they have got scales over their body. You know that fishes' bodies are covered with scales. So which option is correct here? Option B is correct. And few of the mammals also, they have got scales. In this question, it is asked that which of the following statements are true about tendons? First statement, it's a fibrous tissue with great strength and limited flexibility. Second, it connects muscle to bone. Third, it is widely spaced and smoothens bone surfaces at joints. Now let me explain you about connective tissue, because it falls in that category. Connective tissue is basically a tissue which connects, connects different tissues together, and also it is formed of many fibers in it. Okay, and let me tell you that under this category we have one connective tissue, that is dense connective tissue. So in dense connective tissue we have got tendons and ligaments. Now tendons are fibrous tissue, and because they have got lot of collagen fiber in them, and they connect muscle to bone. And if I talk about ligaments, they connect bone to bone. Now here we are talking about tendons. So is it a fibrous tissue with great strength and limited flexibility? Yes. Does it connect muscle to bone? Yes. It is widely spaced and smoothen bone surfaces at joints. It is false for tendons, because we are representing a cartilage, not a property of tendon. So basically here, which statements are correct in accordance with tendons? That is 1 and 2. So which option is correct here? Option A is correct. So correct answer is option A. Next, in which of the given biogeochemical cycles the process of respiration and photosynthesis play a central role? That means when we are talking about biogeochemical cycles, I told you it is a cyclic flow or exchange of nutrients or other substances between abiotic and biotic component. Now we have to tell that in which cycle do you see respiration and photosynthesis playing a central role, main role. So let me tell you, it plays a central role in which cycle? In carbon cycle. Because we know that we have that carbon is present in atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is taken by plants for photosynthesis. That is process of making their own food, and plants are eaten up by animals. Okay, And when animals respire, they give out CO2. And as a result of photosynthesis, plants give out O2. Plants give out O2. And this O2 is used up by the animals for the respiration. So if you will see the carbon, cycle, you will see that respiration basically, respiration and photosynthesis plays a key role, a central role, because both of them are there for, like CO2 is taken up by plants for photosynthesis, but when they respire, then they liberate CO2. But at daytime, when they are photosynthesizing, they are utilizing CO2. And the reverse is true when they respire, like they respire like us. So which option is correct here? Option C is correct. Next, what type of cell is shown in the given figure? Here we have a figure. Now I hope you all know that this cell represents root hair, a cytoplasmic extension of root hair, because sperm cell is involved in sperm cells look like this, and neuron is something like this. This is how you draw neuron, that is dendrites, cell body, axon. It is one of the largest cell of our body, and it is root hair cell. And if I talk about blood cells, we have got different type of blood cells, RBCs, WBC and platelets, and also they have got different feature. Now here you can see that we have cell wall also, we have cell membrane also, you have a tonoplast also. So basically it is a plant cell, and this extension is root hair cell, cytoplasmic extension of root hair. So which answer is correct, students? Option B is correct. Option B is correct. So with this we have come to an end. I hope you have understood all the questions and you have realized what to do, what not to do, and also the tips and tricks which I shared with you. So next time if you get same type of questions, I believe you will not make any sort of mistakes. So better luck for next time. Bye bye from my side and all the best. Thank you.